My grandfather lifted his glass across a table glowing under chandeliers and cinnamon-scented candles and said, "I'm glad you're enjoying the college fund we set aside for you." I went still. My fork paused halfway to my mouth. "What fund?" I asked, and the entire table fell silent, as if someone had flipped a switch. Dad coughed into his napkin, red wine dripping down his wrist. Mom's face drained to chalk. And then my little cousin leaned in and whispered, "Wait, you didn't know?" That was Thanksgiving, the night one careless toast burned down everything I thought I understood about family. Walking into my grandfather's mansion earlier had felt less like going home and more like stepping into a gallery where nothing belonged to me. The long driveway sparkled under gold lights, and through the tall windows I could already see everyone gathered at the grand table. They looked perfect from a distance: silk shirts, polished shoes, smiles rehearsed for holiday photos. I smoothed the wrinkles on my thrift store dress and tried to steady my breathing. Just once, I wanted to make it through a holiday dinner without feeling like a guest in my own bloodline. Inside, warmth wrapped around me: cinnamon, baked rolls, wood polish. Grandma Margaret rushed out of the kitchen with a tray of steaming sweet rolls, still calling me darling the way she had since I was 10. She was the one true, familiar thing in that house. Grandpa Daniel sat at the head of the table, silver hair sharp beneath the chandelier, a man whose confidence filled every inch of the room. When he spotted me, his stern face softened. "There's my Hazel," he said, and for a moment the knot in my chest eased. My parents swept in soon after, loud, shiny, smiling too wide at Uncle Richard's half-funny jokes. My father patted my shoulder like I was an acquaintance. My mother kissed the air near my cheek and whispered, "Try to look relaxed." I nodded, pretending not to notice how her voice trembled. "Ethan?" My brother didn't even look up from his phone. Months had gone by since we'd exchanged anything more than small talk. Dinner unfolded with glittering roasted turkey, mashed potatoes soaking in butter, crystal glasses filled with wine I couldn't pronounce. I sat between Grandma and Aunt Julie, who immediately launched into her yearly interrogation: school, dating, future plans, all coded in sugary politeness that felt more like a pop quiz. I answered neatly, quietly, tracing the rim of my plate with my thumb. Grandpa's deep laughter drifted from the other side of the table, proud and rich. For a moment, I let myself believe in the illusion that this was a family, that maybe this year would be different, that maybe I wouldn't feel like the outsider pieced into a portrait. I wanted to believe it because pretending was easier than remembering the truth: that my parents hadn't answered my calls when rent was late, that they rarely asked about my classes anymore, that I was sitting here in a dress bought with my last paycheck. Still, I let myself cling to the warmth while it lasted. But peace in this family was always the quiet before something snapped. The moment Grandpa's glass touched the table again, everything shifted. His voice had carried warmth a moment ago, but his words now hung in the air like heavy smoke. "Glad you're enjoying the college fund we set up for you." For a second, no one moved. I blinked. "What fund?" I said softly. Too softly because the air split open around me. Dad's chair screeched against the floor. He coughed hard, wine spilling over his cuff. Mom's fork clattered onto our plate. Even the chandelier's glow felt colder. Mason, my 8-year-old cousin, looked up, wide-eyed. "You didn't know?" he whispered. Grandpa frowned. "The fund," he repeated slowly, as if explaining something simple. "The one we opened when you were born. We contributed every year. Your parents have been handling it." I turned to my dad. His face was red, locked tight. Mom stared at her plate, her ring trembling against the china. "You've been managing it," I said, each word dropping heavier than the last. "Because I've been scraping by on $5 coffee shifts and microwave dinners, and that fund never reached me." Mom's voice shook. "Hazel, please, we used it for emergencies. For the house. For Ethan's braces. You were doing fine." "Fine?" I let out a laugh that sounded nothing like me. "Do you know what fine meant?
Working 2 jobs while studying, skipping meals, calling loan offices begging for extensions, that was fine to you? Grandpa's expression hardened, all the pride drained from his posture. That money was for Hazel, he said, staring directly at my parents. For her future, not yours. Dad's voice thickened with defense. Maybe if you hadn't insisted on putting it in our names. Enough, Grandpa snapped, his voice slicing the room in half. We trusted you. Silence swallowed the table. My grandmother's eyes shone with tears. Aunt Julie leaned forward, hungry to witness someone else's downfall. My cousins stared at their food, stiff and awkward. And me? I felt the floor tilt under my feet. I rose slowly. My chair scraped loudly against the polished wood. You let me drown, I said, and you watched. Mom reached out, but I pulled my hand back before she touched me. Don't, I whispered. You don't get to patch this up with guilt. The chandelier flickered overhead as I walked away. No one followed. In the hallway, my reflection glimmered in a gold-framed mirror, small, furious, unrecognizable. And under all the shaking, a new thought settled in my bones. If they could lie that easily, they had no idea what I was capable of telling the truth. Outside, the cold hit like a slap. My breath rose in clouds as the mansion glowed warm behind me, every window watching. I drove home without music, gripping the wheel until my hands ached. In my apartment, everything looked smaller than it had that morning. The peeling walls, the flickering bulb, the pile of overdue bills. Rent, tuition, groceries. Every sacrifice screamed back at me. I kept hearing Grandpa's voice. The fund we set up, and Dad's weak excuse, we meant to replace it. I opened my laptop and searched for the bank Grandpa had mentioned. After an hour of confusing pages and calls, someone finally confirmed. Yes, the representative said, there is an account under your name, but the balance is 0. 0. Soft, gentle, still devastating. Withdrawals were made regularly, signed by John and Linda Anderson. I thanked her and hung up. The quiet in my apartment pressed in from all sides. The next morning, I walked into the campus legal aid office with a folder stuffed full, pay stubs, loan statements, scholarship letters. The woman behind the desk flipped through everything carefully. When she finally looked up, her expression was firm, steady. If that fund was meant for your education and they used it for themselves, that's misappropriation. And just like that, the first spark of revenge began to burn. The word hung heavy between us. Ugly, legal, final. Is that a crime? I asked. It can be, she said gently. If you want to pursue it, start collecting proof. That night, I did exactly that. I built a stack of evidence taller than my textbooks, bills, records, every trace of the life I'd survived without their help. I laid them out across my floor, piece by piece, until the carpet disappeared under paper. Every document was a scar I could finally see. When I was done, I stood there in the stillness, surrounded by the life they'd stolen, and realized I wasn't powerless anymore. They'd taught me silence was strength, but now I knew the truth. Strength was speaking first and letting the truth finish the rest. Christmas came fast that year, wrapped in fake cheer and lights that didn't warm a thing. The same house that had glittered at Thanksgiving now looked colder, like even the gold in the chandeliers couldn't hide the cracks.
I almost didn't go, but Grandpa had called me himself. You should be here, Hazel, he'd said. You deserve to be. So I went, not as the quiet daughter anymore, but as the woman who knew the truth. The front door opened to the same smell of cinnamon and money. My parents were already there, dressed to match the room, perfectly pressed, perfectly false. Mom's voice rose when she saw me. "Hazel, you came," she said, like I'd done something generous. Dad gave a stiff nod, his jaw tight. He hadn't looked me in the eye since Thanksgiving. Ethan mumbled a half-hearted hey from the couch. I hung my coat and glanced toward the dining room. The table was set again, same china, same silverware, same seats. Only this time, the warmth was gone. Grandma stood by the kitchen doorway, hands fidgeting with her apron. Grandpa sat at the head of the table, unreadable.
Dinner started the way all Anderson dinners did, small talk with edges, weather, work, prices, and Aunt Julie dropped passive-aggressive comments like, "Ornaments, Hazel, still in that little apartment, dear?" And Uncle Richard pretended not to hear. I let them talk. I waited. Halfway through the meal, Dad stood and tapped his glass with a spoon. "I just want to say," he began, rehearsed smile on his face, "that family means everything. We've been through a lot this year, but what matters is sticking together." I felt the spark of bitter laughter rise in my throat, but I didn't let it out. Instead, I reached down, lifted the folder from beside my chair, and placed it gently on the table. The sound of it hitting the wood cut through the chatter. "Since Thanksgiving," I said, voice steady, "I've been asking one question. What fund?" The room froze. Grandpa looked up sharply. Mom's hand stopped halfway to her glass. "I have the answer now," I continued, sliding the folder toward the center. "Every withdrawal, every date, every signature. You didn't use the fund for me. You used it for yourselves, for the roof, the car, Ethan's braces, groceries, vacations, all of it." Mom's lips trembled. "Hazel, please, not tonight." I cut her off. "Not tonight? I spent years patching my shoes with duct tape while you sat on money meant for me. I worked double shifts, starved through finals, while you told everyone I was doing fine." Dad's face darkened. "We did what we had to do for the family." I met his eyes. "No, you did what was easiest for you. I was the family." A long, brittle silence followed. The clock ticked once, twice. Grandma whispered, "Oh my God," under her breath. Then Grandpa reached for the folder. He opened it slowly, scanning the first few pages. Bank records, payment slips, my tuition notices. His hands trembled. When he looked up, his voice was quiet but razor sharp. "You stole from your own daughter," he said to my parents, "from your own blood." Mom's tears came fast, messy. "We didn't mean to hurt her." "You drained her future," Grandpa snapped, "and lied to me about it for years." Dad tried to speak, but the anger in Grandpa's eyes stopped him cold. "I trusted you, John. I trusted him with her life." For a moment, no one breathed. Then I spoke, soft but clear. "I've already filed a report. The bank's investigation is open. They'll be in touch about repayment and legal steps." The room broke open. Dad slammed his hand on the table. "You're suing your own parents?" "No," I said. "I'm holding thieves accountable. There's a difference." Mom sobbed harder. "Hazel, you can't do this to us." I looked at her and felt nothing but distance. "You did this to yourselves. You just didn't expect me to notice." Aunt Julie leaned forward, whispering, "Oh dear Lord," like she was watching a movie she couldn't turn off. Ethan sat frozen, guilt flickering across his face. Grandpa stood up slowly, his chair scraping the floor. He walked around the table and stopped beside me. For a second, I thought he might be angry that I'd made a scene. Instead, he put a hand on my shoulder. "You don't have to face this alone," he said quietly. I nodded once, throat tight. "I know." Dad's eyes darted between us, disbelief creeping in. "Are you taking her side?" he asked Grandpa. "There's only one side here," Grandpa said. "The truth." No one spoke after that. The only sound was the slow ticking of the clock and the faint hiss of the fireplace. I gathered the folder, slid it back into my bag, and stood. My legs were steady this time. As I reached the doorway, Mom called out through her tears, "Please, Hazel, we can fix this." I turned back just once. You can't fix something you never intended to keep whole. Outside, snow was falling, thick, quiet, relentless. The air bit at my face, but I didn't mind. Each step away from that house felt lighter. In the driveway, my car was dusted with white. I brushed it off with my sleeve, opened the door, and looked back one last time. The mansion glowed behind me, beautiful and broken. Inside, they'd be sitting in that silence, facing what they'd done. And for the first time, I didn't feel small. As I drove away, the snow caught in the headlights, swirling like ash. The house disappeared in the rearview mirror, and I whispered to no one. Everything fell apart again, but this time it wasn't me who broke. The letter from the bank arrived a week later. Thick envelope, official seal. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. The investigation was underway. Every withdrawal, every forged signature, every transaction was under review. If fraud was proven, my parents would be held financially responsible. I didn't smile, didn't cheer, Justice rarely feels like joy. It feels like breathing again after years underwater. A few days later, Grandpa called. He didn't ask about the case. He just said, "There's something waiting for you at the bank." When I arrived, the teller handed me a cashier's check and a note in his handwriting, "For your start, not your survival." $20,000, enough to lift the weight without erasing the memory of how it got there. I paid down my student loans that afternoon. Watching the numbers shrink on the screen didn't feel like victory. It felt like reclaiming time that had been stolen. I opened a new account under my name only. No shared signatures, no loopholes, just mine. Spring came early that year. I graduated under a pale sky, wearing a borrowed cap and a smile that finally felt earned. In the crowd, I saw Grandpa and Grandma clapping for me. My parents weren't there. I told myself I didn't care, and for once, it was true. When I walked across that stage, I wasn't carrying their shame anymore, only my own, and the quiet kind of peace that comes after the storm. They say family is forever, but forever doesn't mean blind loyalty. Sometimes it means knowing when to walk away. I used to think strength was staying silent, keeping the peace no matter the cost, but now I know silence only protects the ones who hurt you. Family isn't the people who share your blood, it's the ones who don't steal your future. If you've ever had to choose truth over family, tell me where you're listening from so I know I'm not alone. And hit subscribe because the next story might remind you just how strong you already are.